A powerful CEO fires a dedicated employee for speaking the truth, but when serious illness strikes, she becomes his unexpected caregiver. As he lies helpless in her care, shocking corporate secrets emerge that threaten everything he's built. Her choice to show compassion to the man who ruined her career will shake the foundations of a billion-dollar empire and prove that true power comes from something money can't buy. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Seattle skyline gleamed through sheets of autumn rain as Rebecca Chen hurried along the wet sidewalk, clutching her umbrella against the wind. At 36, she was starting her first day at Westside Medical Center after months of unemployment, and being late wasn't an option. "Just be grateful," she whispered to herself, straightening her practical navy scrubs before entering through the staff entrance. 6 months ago, she'd been the respected director of quality control at Titan Pharmaceuticals, with an office overlooking Puget Sound and a 6-figure salary. Now she was taking a job as a home health aide at half her former pay, hoping to rebuild a career shattered by one fateful board meeting. "Rebecca, you made it!" Nurse manager Helen Patel greeted her with a warm smile. "Traffic's brutal with this weather." "I left extra early," Rebecca said, trying to mask her nervousness. "I can't afford to make a bad impression." Helen's expression softened. "Everyone deserves a second chance. Now, your first assignment came in last night." She handed Rebecca a folder. "It's a private case, very hush-hush. The patient needs round-the-clock care for a severe case of pneumonia complicated by exhaustion." Rebecca opened the folder and froze. Staring back at her from the patient information sheet was a face she knew all too well. Steel gray eyes, sharp jawline, the confident half-smile of a man accustomed to getting his way. "Alexander Morgan," she breathed, her stomach clenching. "You know him?" Helen asked. "Everyone in biotech knows Alexander Morgan," Rebecca said carefully. "The CEO of Titan Pharmaceuticals. The man who had personally fired her 6 months ago." "Well, now he's just a patient who needs care," Helen said. "His condition is serious, but not critical. His executive assistant arranged everything, requesting our most experienced aide. I thought with your medical background, you'd be perfect." Rebecca wanted to refuse, to explain why she couldn't possibly care for this man. But the 6 months of rejection letters, dwindling savings, and her mother's mounting medical bills flashed through her mind. She couldn't afford principals right now. "I'll do it," she said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. The Morgan estate stood on Mercer Island, a modernist glass and cedar mansion surrounded by towering pines. Rebecca parked her 12-year-old Honda next to a line of luxury vehicles, feeling desperately out of place. A tall woman in an impeccable suit met her at the door. Vanessa Winters. She introduced herself with a quick, firm handshake. "Mr. Morgan's executive assistant. Thank you for coming on such short notice." "Rebecca Chen," she replied, trying not to think about their last encounter. Vanessa standing silently behind Alexander as he told Rebecca to clear out her desk. If Vanessa recognized her, she showed no sign of it. "Mr. Morgan collapsed during a board meeting 3 days ago. He refused hospitalization, so we've converted the guest suite into a care room. The doctor visits twice daily. Pneumonia, correct?" Rebecca asked, following Vanessa through the soaring main hall. "Yes, with complications. Mr. Morgan has been working 18-hour days for months launching our new drug. His immune system is compromised from stress and exhaustion." The irony wasn't lost on Rebecca. The new drug was undoubtedly Resolin, the breakthrough treatment for autoimmune diseases that Rebecca had tried to delay. The one she'd been fired over when she raised safety concerns. The guest suite was larger than Rebecca's entire apartment. Medical equipment surrounded an adjustable hospital bed where Alexander Morgan lay sleeping, his normally commanding presence diminished by illness. His skin had a grayish tinge, and his breathing came in labored wheezes. "He doesn't know you're coming," Vanessa said quietly. "The fever makes him confused at times. When he's lucid, he's difficult." "I can handle difficult patients," Rebecca said. Vanessa nodded. "There's a staff apartment through that door where you can rest during your off hours. You'll work 12-hour shifts with another aide covering nights. The kitchen staff will bring your meals." If you need anything, call me directly." She handed Rebecca a card. Not a word about his condition to anyone outside this house. The company's stock would plummet if word got out. After Vanessa left, Rebecca stood staring at the sleeping figure who had demolished her career with a few casual words. "You lack what Titan needs going forward," he had told her in that final meeting. "Vision, boldness, the willingness to take necessary risks." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. What he'd meant was, you won't keep quiet about the safety issues with Resolin. Rebecca set up her workstation, reviewing his chart. His fever was hovering at 102. Oxygen levels concerning, but not critical. As she was checking the IV antibiotics, his eyes suddenly opened, those penetrating gray eyes that had once stared her down across a boardroom table. For a moment, they were clear and alert. Then confusion clouded them. "Who are you?" His voice was a raspy whisper, so unlike the confident baritone she remembered. "I'm Rebecca Chen, your home health aide," she said professionally. A flash of recognition crossed his face, quickly replaced by a grimace. "No. Get out. Get Vanessa. Mr. Morgan, you need care, and I'm qualified to." I said, "Get out." His attempt to shout dissolved into violent coughing that left him gasping. Rebecca efficiently elevated his bed, held a tissue for him, and adjusted his oxygen. When the coughing subsided, she calmly took his vitals, ignoring his glare. "Your fever's up," she reported. "I need to start a new cooling protocol." "Did you hear me? I want someone else." Rebecca met his gaze directly. "It's Sunday evening in the middle of a nursing shortage. There is no one else available with my qualifications. So you have two choices. Let me do my job, or risk a hospital transfer that Vanessa tells me you're determined to avoid." They locked eyes in a silent battle of wills. Finally, he closed his eyes. "Fine. Temporarily." Rebecca worked through the evening, administering medications, monitoring his vitals, and keeping detailed notes. Alexander drifted in and out of consciousness, his fever climbing despite the antibiotics. When he was awake, he watched her with suspicious eyes, answering her medical questions in clipped monosyllables. Around midnight, his fever spiked dangerously. Rebecca placed cooling packs around his body and called Dr. Patel, who ordered additional medication. "Why are you really here?" Alexander asked suddenly as she adjusted his IV. His eyes were bright with fever. "Did Davis send you? To get information?" "I'm here because you're ill and need care," Rebecca replied calmly. "No one sent me." He laughed bitterly, then winced in pain. "Everyone wants something." "Right now, I want your fever to come down," she said. "Try to rest." But as the night progressed, his condition worsened. By 3 a.m. he was delirious, alternating between aggressive demands and mumbled conversations with people who weren't there. Rebecca stayed well past the end of her shift, monitoring him closely until his fever finally broke just before dawn. As light filtered through the blinds, Alexander fell into an exhausted sleep. Rebecca checked his vitals one final time before the night aide arrived. A motherly woman named Gloria who took one look at Rebecca's tired face and said, "You stayed all night, didn't you?" "That's above and beyond." "He was critical," Rebecca said simply. "I couldn't leave." As she drove home through the quiet morning streets, Rebecca wondered what she was doing. Alexander Morgan had destroyed her career without a second thought, and now she was fighting to save his life. But beneath her resentment lay the uncomfortable truth that had gotten her fired in the first place. She couldn't walk away from someone in need, even if that someone was Alexander Morgan. When Rebecca returned the next day, she found Alexander sitting up, looking considerably more alert, though still weak. He watched her enter with an unreadable expression. "You stayed all night," he said. It wasn't a question. "Your fever was dangerous," she replied, setting down her bag. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," he admitted. "But lucid. Gloria told me what you did. Rebecca shrugged. It's my job. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Finally, Alexander spoke. Why did you take this assignment? You must have known who I was. I didn't, Rebecca said honestly. Not until I got the folder. By then, it was too late to refuse without risking my new position. Which you need because I fired you, he said bluntly. Yes. Another silence. Then, you could have let me get worse. Called the ambulance a little later. No one would have questioned it. Rebecca looked at him sharply. Is that what you would have done? Before he could answer, a coughing fit seized him. Rebecca quickly provided water and adjusted his oxygen, her movements efficient and impersonal. As the days passed, an uneasy routine developed. Alexander grew stronger but remained confined to bed, his powerful frame weakened by illness. Rebecca maintained professional detachment, performing her duties with quiet competence. They rarely spoke beyond medical necessities. But Rebecca couldn't help noticing things. How Alexander tensed whenever Vanessa arrived with stacks of documents requiring his signature. How he stared out the window at the lake for long periods, his expression haunted. How he refused all visitors except Vanessa and Dr. Patel. On the fourth day, Rebecca arrived to find Alexander attempting to stand, his legs trembling with the effort. What are you doing? She demanded, rushing to prevent him from falling. I have a company to run, he said through gritted teeth. I've been in this bed too long. Your body needs time to heal, Rebecca said, guiding him back to the bed. Push too hard now, and you'll end up worse than before. I don't have time, he snapped. The Resolin launches in 3 weeks. Everything I've built is riding on it. Resolin, the drug that had cost Rebecca her career. She carefully kept her face neutral. The company survived 3 days without you. It can manage a few more. Alexander gave her a sharp look. You don't understand what's at stake. I understand that you nearly died, Rebecca replied. Whatever's happening at Titan, it's not worth your life. To her surprise, Alexander fell silent, his expression troubled. He allowed her to help him back to bed without further protest. That afternoon, Vanessa arrived looking tense, her perfect composure showing cracks. She asked Rebecca to leave while she spoke with Alexander. Rebecca stepped into the adjoining room but left the door slightly ajar, telling herself she was being cautious about her patient's condition. The FDA is asking questions, Vanessa was saying. Davis thinks someone leaked information about the Phase 3 data. What specifically? Alexander's voice was much stronger when talking business. The liver toxicity results. The ones we adjusted. Rebecca froze. The liver toxicity results. Exactly what she'd raised concerns about 6 months ago. Damage control? Alexander asked. We're handling it, Vanessa assured him. But Davis is pushing to accelerate the launch before any formal inquiry can begin. He needs your signature on these documents. A long silence followed. Leave them, Alexander finally said. I'll review them tonight. After Vanessa left, Rebecca returned to find Alexander staring at a thick folder, his expression grim. Everything all right? She asked, checking his IV. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, why did you really flag those safety concerns about Resolin? The question caught her off guard. Because the data showed potential liver damage in a small but significant percentage of test subjects, she answered carefully. It needed further study before going to market. And you were willing to delay a drug that could help millions of people suffering from autoimmune diseases because of a small percentage risk. I was willing to delay a drug to ensure it wouldn't harm the very people it was meant to help, Rebecca corrected. Good medicine isn't just about helping some people while accepting that others will be collateral damage. Alexander's jaw tightened. The business of medicine requires difficult decisions. Is that what you tell yourself? The words slipped out before Rebecca could stop them. Instead of anger, Alexander's response was unexpectedly thoughtful. Every major drug has side effects, Rebecca. If we waited for perfect safety, nothing would ever reach the people who desperately need help. There's a difference between acceptable risk and hidden danger, Rebecca said. When you know something is potentially harmful and conceal that information, you cross a line. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Rebecca saw uncertainty in his. Then he looked away. You should check my temperature. I think the fever's returning. That night, Rebecca found Alexander awake when she came to administer his midnight medication. He was sitting by the window, a blanket around his shoulders, looking out at the moonlight reflecting off the lake. You should be resting, she said. I've been thinking about what you said, he replied without turning. About lines being crossed. Rebecca remained silent, waiting. When I started Titan, I wanted to help people, he continued. My sister died of lupus when we were teenagers. I watched her suffer for years while treatments failed one after another. He finally turned to look at Rebecca. Do you know what it's like to watch someone you love in constant pain, knowing there's nothing you can do? Yes, Rebecca said quietly. My mother has multiple sclerosis. That's why I became interested in immunology in the first place. Surprise flickered across Alexander's face. I didn't know that. You never asked. He acknowledged this with a slight nod. Resolin could help people like your mother. It's shown remarkable results for MS in trials. If it doesn't damage her liver in the process, Rebecca countered. Alexander's shoulders slumped slightly. When did it get so complicated? When did I start justifying cutting corners as necessary risk? The vulnerability in his voice struck Rebecca. For the first time, she saw not the arrogant CEO who had fired her, but a tired, ill man wrestling with difficult truths. The line gets blurry when you're too close to see it clearly, she said. That's why you need people who will tell you the truth, even when you don't want to hear it. People like you, he said wryly. People like me, she agreed. The next morning, Rebecca arrived to find Alexander's room filled with executives in expensive suits. She recognized several Titan board members, including James Davis, the aggressive CFO who had been the loudest voice calling for her termination. Rebecca, Alexander called when he saw her. Come in. The executives turned to stare at her, and Davis's eyes narrowed in recognition. What is she doing here? He demanded. Keeping me alive, apparently, Alexander replied dryly. Rebecca, these gentlemen were just explaining why we need to rush Resolin to market despite some concerning safety data. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Rebecca felt their hostile stares but kept her expression neutral. Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately, Davis suggested. No, Alexander said firmly. I want Rebecca's perspective. After all, she was right about the liver toxicity issues, wasn't she? Davis's face reddened. Alex, you can't be serious. She's just a highly qualified scientist who raised valid safety concerns that we ignored. Alexander finished for him. Concerns that the FDA is now investigating. Rebecca stood perfectly still, hardly believing what she was hearing. The FDA only knows because someone leaked confidential data. Davis snapped, glaring at Rebecca. I didn't leak anything, Rebecca said calmly. But I'm not surprised the truth came out. It usually does. Alexander coughed, and Rebecca automatically moved to check on him. The action seemed to incense Davis further. This is absurd, he sputtered. You're letting this woman influence crucial business decisions because she's been playing Florence Nightingale? Alexander's expression hardened. I'm reconsidering crucial business decisions because they were wrong, James. We falsified data. We knowingly hid risks. That's not just bad ethics. It's bad business. When this comes out, and it will come out, Titan's reputation will be destroyed. The board won't stand for this, Davis threatened. Then call an emergency meeting, Alexander replied. I'll be there to explain why we're delaying the Resolin launch, pending further safety studies and full disclosure to the FDA. The executives left in a cloud of angry mutters. Vanessa lingered behind, her expression conflicted. Are you sure about this, Alex? She asked quietly. The stock will tank. The board might remove you. I'm sure, he he said. Draw up the paperwork for the FDA disclosure. And Vanessa? Find out if Rebecca's former position has been filled. If not, we'll need to discuss her reinstatement, with appropriate compensation for wrongful termination. After Vanessa left, Rebecca stood in stunned silence. You don't have to do that, she finally said. Reinstate you? Alexander raised an eyebrow. I absolutely do. It was wrong to fire you for doing your job. No, I mean the Resolin delay. It will cost Titan millions. Rushing a flawed drug to market would eventually cost more. In lawsuits, in FDA penalties, in lost trust, Alexander sighed, and in lives. I lost sight of that somewhere along the way. Rebecca studied him, trying to reconcile this man with the cold executive who had dismissed her concerns so easily months ago. What changed? She asked. Alexander met her gaze directly. Nearly dying has a way of clarifying priorities. So does being cared for by someone who has every reason to resent you, yet still stays up all night to bring down your fever. He paused. I built Titan to help people like my sister, not to cut corners for profit. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. A week later, Rebecca helped Alexander walk slowly around the lakeside path on the estate grounds, his strength gradually returning. News of Titan's voluntary delay of Resolin had indeed tanked the stock temporarily, but Alexander's candid press conference about improving safety protocols had begun to rebuild investor confidence. The board meeting is tomorrow, he said as they paused at a bench overlooking the water. They may still vote to remove me. Then you'll fight, Rebecca said simply, or start something new. Either way, you did the right thing. Alexander turned to look at her, something unspoken in his eyes. I've been meaning to ask you something. Will you come back to Titan? Not just to your old position. I want to create a new role, Chief Ethics Officer, reporting directly to me. We need someone who won't be afraid to tell me when I'm crossing lines. Rebecca considered the offer. 6 months ago, it would have seemed like vindication, a dream job. Now, she wasn't so sure. I need time to think about it, she said honestly. Alexander nodded. Fair enough. Whatever you decide, I owe you more than I can repay. Not just for the care when I was ill, but for the wake-up call. Sometimes we need someone to remind us who we really are, or who we're supposed to be. As they walked back toward the house, Rebecca thought about second chances, for Alexander, for Titan, for herself. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in months, the future held promise rather than regret. The emergency board meeting at Titan Pharmaceuticals was held in the same sleek conference room where Rebecca had been fired 6 months earlier. Now she sat outside, waiting. Alexander had asked her to come for moral support, though what support she could offer the CEO facing his own board remained unclear. Through the glass walls, she could see Alexander standing at the head of the table, his posture straight despite his recent illness. He'd insisted on wearing a suit today, though Rebecca had seen how the effort of dressing had taxed his still recovering strength. You shouldn't be here, a cold voice said. Rebecca looked up to find James Davis glaring down at her. Haven't you done enough damage? I was invited, Rebecca replied calmly, though her heart raced. This man had once called her the most dangerous kind of employee, one who placed principles above profits. Alex is making a mistake, Davis said. One the board will correct today. Before Rebecca could respond, the conference room door opened and Vanessa emerged. They're ready for you, she said to Rebecca, ignoring Davis completely. Inside, 15 board members sat around the massive table, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Alexander nodded at Rebecca, gesturing for her to take the empty seat beside him. Thank you all for coming, he began, his voice steady. Before you vote on my future with this company, I want to introduce Rebecca Chen, former Director of Quality Control at Titan, who was terminated for raising safety concerns about Resolin, concerns that have since been validated by independent FDA review. Rebecca felt the weight of every stare in the room. This wasn't what she had expected. 6 months ago, I made a decision that violated everything Titan was founded to represent, Alexander continued. I chose profits over safety, market share over transparency. And when Ms. Chen challenged that decision, I removed her rather than addressing the legitimate issues she raised. A murmur ran through the board members. Rebecca remained perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. "My recent illness gave me perspective," Alexander said. Titan was never meant to be just another pharmaceutical company cutting corners for quarterly profits. It was meant to create medications that genuinely help people without causing new harms. If we've lost sight of that mission, then perhaps new leadership is indeed needed. Harold Winters, the eldest board member, spoke up. "Alex, you've always been idealistic, but business is business. Every drug has risks. What matters is the benefit-to-risk ratio." "Which is precisely why Resolin needs more testing," Rebecca interjected, unable to remain silent. "The current liver toxicity data suggests the risk is higher than initially reported." "That's not a subjective judgment. It's measurable data that was deliberately minimized." Davis snorted. "And who decided that? You?" "No," Alexander replied before Rebecca could. "Independent review confirmed it. I've provided each of you with copies of both the original data and the altered reports that were prepared for the FDA submission." He paused, looking each board member in the eye. "That's fraud, ladies and gentlemen. That's criminal liability. And that stops today, regardless of your vote." The mood in the room shifted palpably. Board members leafed through the documents with growing concern. "What exactly are you proposing, Alex?" asked Diane Mayer, who represented the company's largest investor group. "A 6-month delay on Resolin while we conduct additional liver toxicity studies with complete transparency. A full disclosure to the FDA about the previously altered data, with my personal statement taking responsibility. And the creation of a new executive position, Chief Ethics Officer, with direct board access to ensure this never happens again." "And the cost?" Winters demanded. "Approximately $60 million in the short term," Alexander admitted. "But compare that to the potential cost of lawsuits, criminal penalties, and destroyed market confidence if we proceed as planned and patients start developing liver failure." Rebecca watched the calculations happening behind each board member's eyes. Not just financial calculations, but moral ones too. Some looked troubled, others thoughtful. Only Davis appeared purely angry. "This is corporate suicide," he sputtered. "Our competitors will leap ahead while we're conducting unnecessary additional testing." "Is it unnecessary if it prevents harm?" Rebecca asked quietly. "Is it unnecessary if it saves lives?" The room fell silent. Then Diane Mayer set down the documents and addressed Alexander directly. "You've put us in an impossible position, Alex. If what these papers show is accurate, we have a legal obligation to disclose it, but the company will take a massive hit." "Yes," Alexander agreed, "but we'll survive it and rebuild stronger, with our integrity intact." "And you expect us to just trust you after this fiasco?" Davis demanded. "No," Alexander said. "I expect you to hold me accountable. That's why I'm proposing that Ms. Chen take the new ethics officer position, reporting both to me and directly to the board when necessary." Rebecca's head snapped up in surprise. This was the first she'd heard of direct board access, a level of authority rarely granted to anyone below the C-suite. After 2 hours of heated debate, the board voted 9-6 to support Alexander's plan, with the stipulation that an oversight committee would monitor the situation weekly. Davis and his closest allies stormed out immediately after the vote. "Congratulations," Alexander said to Rebecca as they left the building. "Titan's new chief ethics officer. That is, if you accept." "You took a massive risk in there," Rebecca replied, still processing what had happened. "They could have removed you." "Some risks are worth taking," he said simply. "Like hiring someone who isn't afraid to stand up to you when you're wrong." His eyes met hers. "Will you accept the position?" Looking at Alexander, still pale from his illness, but standing taller somehow than the powerful CEO who had fired her, Rebecca made her decision. "Yes, but on one condition. Complete autonomy. If I find something concerning, I raise it without fear of repercussion." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Alexander said, extending his hand. As they shook on it, Rebecca felt something shift between them. A new foundation of mutual respect where once there had been only power and resentment. The following weeks brought sweeping changes to Titan. The stock initially plummeted 22% when Alexander publicly disclosed the Resolin safety concerns and testing delays. Financial analysts predicted disaster. Industry insiders called it Morgan's Folly. Rebecca stepped into her new role with determination, establishing rigorous ethical review processes for every aspect of drug development. Her first major task was a comprehensive audit of all current Titan products and pipeline drugs, searching for any other compromised data. "You're making enemies," Vanessa warned her one evening as they worked late. To Rebecca's surprise, Alexander's assistant had become an ally, providing invaluable support navigating Titan's complex corporate structure. "I'm not here to win popularity contests," Rebecca replied, reviewing a stack of clinical trial data. "No, but you should watch your back. Davis hasn't given up. He's meeting with board members privately, trying to undermine both you and Alex." Rebecca sighed, rubbing her tired eyes. "I expected as much. How's Alexander holding up?" "Working too hard, as usual," Vanessa said. "His doctor wants him to take more time to recover, but he insists on being here every day." She hesitated. "He's different since the illness. More like the Alex I knew when Titan was just starting, before all the pressure and politics." "I never knew that version of him," Rebecca admitted. "You would have liked him," Vanessa said with a small smile. "He was brilliant but humble, passionate about changing patients' lives. He used to know every employee's name." She gathered her things to leave. "Maybe that Alex is coming back." "I hope so." Alone in her office, ironically larger and more prestigious than the one she'd been forced to vacate 6 months earlier, Rebecca reflected on Vanessa's words. She'd been so focused on the work, on proving herself in this new role, that she'd had little time to consider the man who had created the position for her. The next morning, Rebecca presented her preliminary audit findings to Alexander in his office. The news wasn't good. "3 other drugs with questionable data?" Alexander repeated, his expression grave. "Are you certain?" "Unfortunately, yes," Rebecca confirmed. "Not as serious as Resolin, but concerning nonetheless. All 3 issues developed in the last 2 years, all involving studies overseen directly by Davis's team." Alexander paced by the window, the Seattle skyline a gray backdrop behind him. "This is worse than I thought. It's becoming a pattern, not an isolated incident." "There's more," Rebecca said reluctantly. "I found emails suggesting Davis specifically directed researchers to clean up unfavorable results before presenting them to you or the FDA." Alexander stopped pacing. "You have proof?" Rebecca nodded, sliding a folder across his desk. "Enough to establish a pattern of deliberate data manipulation. Alexander, this goes beyond negligence. This is fraud." He sat heavily in his chair, suddenly looking exhausted. Rebecca noticed with concern how the morning light accentuated the lingering hollows beneath his eyes, the weight he hadn't yet regained since his illness. "You should be resting more," she said impulsively. "You're pushing yourself too hard." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Now you sound like my doctor. And Vanessa. And pretty much everyone else." "Because we're right," Rebecca said. "Your body is still recovering." "There's no time," he replied, gesturing to the damning folder. "Especially now." "There never is time until you make it," Rebecca countered. "I learned that caring for my mother. Some things can't be rushed, including healing." Alexander looked at her with unexpected intensity. "How is your mother? You mentioned she has MS." Surprised by the personal question, Rebecca hesitated before answering. "She has good days and bad. The latest treatment helps, but it's a constant battle." "Is that why you were so invested in Resolin? Because it might eventually help conditions like hers?" "Partly," Rebecca admitted. "But I'd never want her to take a medication with hidden risks, no matter how promising the benefits. That's why what happened with Resolin hit me so hard. These aren't just data points, they're people's lives." Alexander was silent for a long moment. "I used to know that," he finally said. "Somewhere along the way I started seeing numbers instead of patients. Growth projections instead of improved lives." He looked down at the folder. "And now people could be harmed because of it." "We caught it in time," Rebecca reminded him. "That's what matters now." "Thanks to you," he said, meeting her eyes again. Twice now, you've prevented disaster. First with Resolin, and now with these other drugs. I owe you more than I can say." Something in his gaze made Rebecca uncomfortable, not in an unpleasant way, but in a way that felt dangerous, complicated. She quickly steered the conversation back to safer ground. "We need to decide how to handle Davis," she said. "These emails are enough for termination at minimum. Possibly criminal charges." Alexander nodded. The vulnerable moment passed. "Let me handle Davis. You focus on correcting any issues with these drugs before they cause harm." That afternoon, Rebecca was deep in research when her office door burst open. James Davis stormed in, his face contorted with rage. "You scheming bitch," he snarled. "You think you can destroy me?" Rebecca rose calmly, though her heart hammered. "Mr. Davis, I suggest you leave before you say something you'll regret. You've poisoned Alex against me," he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "Fed him lies and manipulated him when he was weak." "The emails speak for themselves," Rebecca replied, her voice steady. "The data manipulation was documented by your own team." Davis slammed his fist on her desk. "You think you're so righteous? This is business. Everyone cuts corners. Everyone. Alex used to understand that before you got your hooks into him. Is everything all right in here?" Alexander's voice came from the doorway, his tone dangerous. Davis straightened, attempting to compose himself. "Alex, we need to talk. Privately. This situation has been grossly misrepresented." "I've seen the emails, James," Alexander said coldly. "Security is waiting to escort you out. Your termination paperwork is being processed. The board has been informed." "You can't do this to me," Davis shouted. "I built this company with you." "And now you've nearly destroyed it," Alexander replied. "You're lucky we're not pressing charges yet. That decision will depend on what else we find in your files." As security led a still protesting Davis away, Alexander turned to Rebecca. "Are you all right? Did he threaten you?" "I'm fine," she assured him. "Just rattled." "I should have anticipated he'd come after you," Alexander said, clearly angry with himself. "I'm sorry you had to face that." "I can handle men like Davis," Rebecca said. "I've dealt with worse." Alexander looked at her with that same intense expression from earlier. "You shouldn't have to, though. Not here, not anymore." He hesitated. "Have dinner with me tonight. There's something I want to discuss away from the office." Rebecca blinked, caught off guard. "Dinner?" "Just business," he clarified quickly. "A proposal about the future of Titan. My driver can pick you up at 7? Rebecca found herself agreeing, though a voice in her head warned that boundaries were blurring in ways that made her uneasy. Professional admiration was one thing. Anything more would be complicated, inappropriate even. Yet something about Alexander Morgan, not the powerful CEO who had fired her, but the changed man who had emerged from illness with new clarity, intrigued her in ways she wasn't ready to examine too closely. The restaurant was perched on the top floor of a downtown high-rise, with sweeping views of Elliott Bay. Rebecca felt underdressed in her simple black dress compared to the other diners in designer wear, but Alexander, in a casual sport coat rather than his usual formal suit, seemed unconcerned with appearances. "Thank you for coming," he said as they were seated at a private table overlooking the water. "I know it's been a difficult day." "It's been a difficult 6 months," Rebecca replied with a small smile. "But today was actually productive, despite Davis's meltdown. The research team is already working on corrections for the compromised studies." Alexander nodded, but seemed distracted. He ordered wine for them both, then fell silent, staring out at the lights reflecting on the dark water. "You said you had a proposal to discuss?" Rebecca prompted gently. He turned back to her, his expression serious. "Yes, but first I want to explain something. About Titan. About why it matters to me." He took a breath. "My sister Emma was diagnosed with lupus when she was 15. I was 17. Our parents had died in a car accident 2 years earlier, so it was just us, getting by on their insurance money and my part-time job." Rebecca listened intently, seeing new dimensions to the man across from her. Emma's condition progressed rapidly. Alexander continued. The medications available then were limited, with brutal side effects. I watched her suffer through treatments that sometimes seemed worse than the disease itself. She died 3 years later, during my sophomore year of college. I'm so sorry, Rebecca said softly. I changed my major from literature to biochemistry the next semester, he said. Got my PhD in immunology. Started Titan with a mission to develop better treatments for autoimmune diseases, ones that actually improved quality of life instead of just extending it at any cost. His eyes met hers. That was the original vision. Somewhere along the way, as we grew, as investors came in with their expectations and demands, that vision got buried under profit margins and market share. Until your illness, Rebecca said. Until my illness, he agreed. And until you forced me to see what Titan was becoming under my leadership. The waiter interrupted with their wine and took their dinner orders. When they were alone again, Alexander leaned forward. Here's my proposal. I want to restructure Titan completely. Create a new division focused solely on developing treatments for autoimmune diseases, with an emphasis on minimal side effects and quality of life improvements. No profit pressure, no rushing to market, just good science with a clear, patient-focused mission. His eyes were bright with an enthusiasm Rebecca had never seen in him before. And I want you to lead it. Rebecca sat back, stunned. Me? Alexander, I'm not a research director. I'm in quality control and ethics. Exactly, he said. You understand that the process matters as much as the outcome. You see the human cost of cutting corners. And you have the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it costs you personally. He smiled. Besides, your background in immunology makes you uniquely qualified. How did you know about my immunology background? Rebecca asked, surprised. Alexander looked slightly embarrassed. I may have reviewed your personnel file more thoroughly after I fired you, when I was trying to convince myself I'd made the right decision. And did you? Convince yourself? No, he admitted. Even before I got sick, I knew I'd made a mistake. I just didn't want to admit it. Rebecca sipped her wine, considering his proposal. This would be a massive undertaking. The board would need to approve it. Investors might balk at a division without profit pressure. Let me worry about the board and the investors, Alexander said. What I need to know is, are you interested? Looking at him, passionate, engaged, so different from the cold executive she'd known before, Rebecca felt something shift inside her. This was the man Vanessa had described, the original Alexander Morgan who had founded Titan with a mission born of personal loss and genuine desire to help. Yes, she said. I'm interested, but I need to understand exactly what you're envisioning. As they talked through dinner, the plan took shape between them. A semi-autonomous research division with patient advocacy involvement at every level, transparent data practices, and ethical considerations built into the process rather than added as an afterthought. By dessert, Rebecca found herself caught up in Alexander's enthusiasm, suggesting refinements and expansions to the concept. This could change how pharmaceutical research is conducted, she said, realizing the potential impact. If it succeeds, other companies might adopt similar models. That's the hope, Alexander agreed. Create something so successful that the industry has to take notice. As his driver took them home later, Rebecca felt a new sense of possibility. Not just for her career, but for what Titan could become. The city lights blurred past the car windows as she considered the strange journey that had brought her here. From being fired by this man to potentially partnering with him on a revolutionary new vision. Thank you for hearing me out, Alexander said as the car pulled up to her apartment building. I know this is a lot to consider. It is, Rebecca agreed, but it's also the most exciting proposal I've heard in years. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes and transformed his face. We make a good team, Rebecca Chen. Who would have thought it possible 6 months ago? As she watched his car pull away, Rebecca wondered what her mother would say about this unexpected turn of events. Lin Chen had always told her daughter that life's greatest opportunities often came disguised as its greatest challenges. Perhaps this was exactly what she had meant. What neither Rebecca nor Alexander could know as they parted that evening was that their nascent partnership was about to face its greatest test, one that would challenge everything they thought they knew about each other, about Titan, and about the true cost of doing the right thing. The announcement of Titan's new autoimmune research division sent shockwaves through the pharmaceutical industry. Financial analysts called it unprecedented and financially reckless. Competitors watched with a mixture of skepticism and concern, but patients and advocacy groups celebrated, flooding Titan's social media with messages of support and hope. "This is what changing the world looks like," Alexander told Rebecca as they reviewed the public response in his office. Disruption before acceptance. 3 months into the project, Rebecca had assembled a team of researchers passionate about the mission. They'd established a transparent research protocol with patient representatives involved at every level. The board, initially hesitant, had been won over by Alexander's unwavering commitment and Rebecca's detailed planning. Everything was moving forward until the Tuesday morning when Rebecca arrived at work to find her team gathered around a computer, expressions grim. "What's happening?" she asked. Dr. Maya Patel, their lead immunologist, looked up. "Medicor just announced a breakthrough treatment for lupus. They're calling it Luminax." She turned the screen to show Rebecca. Phase 3 trials completed with exceptional results. FDA approval expected within months. Rebecca's stomach dropped as she scanned the press release. Luminax appeared to target the same autoimmune pathway their lead compound was exploring. But Medicor was years ahead. How did they get so far without anyone knowing? Someone asked. "They kept it completely under wraps," Maya replied. "Conducted trials overseas to avoid U.S. disclosure requirements." Rebecca's phone buzzed with a message from Alexander, "My office. Now." She found him pacing, Vanessa hovering nearby looking concerned. "You've seen the news?" he asked without preamble. Rebecca nodded. "It's a significant setback, but not insurmountable. We can pivot our—" "It's worse than you think," Alexander interrupted. "Look at this." He handed her a tablet displaying an internal Medicor document. "Our IT security team intercepted this from a former Titan employee who joined Medicor last year." Rebecca skimmed the document, her blood running cold. "This is our research. These are our early-stage compounds." She looked up, stunned. "They stole our work." "Yes." Alexander's voice was tight with controlled fury. "And guess who's listed as head of their lupus research division? James Davis. Davis took our data when he left." Rebecca realized. That's how they accelerated their timeline. "It gets worse," Vanessa said quietly, handing Rebecca another document. "Medicor filed patents on these compounds 2 months ago. They're claiming ownership of research that originated here." Rebecca sank into a chair, the implications hitting her. "If these patents are granted, our entire research program could be legally blocked." "Exactly," Alexander said. 3 years of work and millions in investment could be rendered useless. The room fell silent as the magnitude of the crisis settled over them. "What are our options?" Rebecca finally asked. "Legal action is one route," Alexander replied. "We can challenge the patents, prove the research was stolen. But that could take years and millions in legal fees, with no guarantee of success. Meanwhile, Medicor brings Luminax to market, establishes dominance, and our patient-centered approach gets buried," Rebecca said, thinking aloud. "There's another option," Vanessa said hesitantly. Both turned to look at her. "Medicor's CEO called this morning. He wants to meet." Alexander's eyes narrowed. "What does Vincent Shaw want?" "He didn't say," Vanessa replied. "But his assistant hinted it was about an acquisition offer." "They steal our research, then try to buy us?" Rebecca said incredulously. "It's actually a clever strategy," Alexander said bitterly. "Weaken us with the patent challenge, then offer to save us through acquisition. Our board would likely support it given the circumstances." "You can't seriously be considering selling to them," Rebecca protested. Alexander ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly tired. "Of course not. But we need to understand what we're facing." He turned to Vanessa. "Set up the meeting. Tomorrow, if possible." After Vanessa left, Rebecca studied Alexander. The strain was visible in the tight set of his shoulders, the shadows under his eyes. "We'll fight this," she said firmly. "We've faced worse." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Have we?" "Well, you nearly died, and I was fired and rehired. So yes, I'd say we have." His smile strengthened slightly. "When you put it that way." He sighed, looking out at the Seattle skyline. "The thing is, Rebecca, this isn't just about Titan or our research. If Medicor brings Luminax to market, it will almost certainly have the same liver toxicity issues we identified in our early compounds. They've skipped crucial safety steps to beat us to market." "So patients could be harmed," Rebecca said quietly. "Yes. The very people I promised to help." He turned back to her, his expression resolute. "I need you in that meeting tomorrow. Vincent Shaw is shrewd and ruthless, but he's never faced someone like you." "Someone like me?" "Someone who sees through corporate double talk and stands firm on what matters." The next day, Rebecca sat beside Alexander in Titan's executive conference room, watching Vincent Shaw stride in with calculated confidence. In his late 50s, with silver hair and a tan that suggested more time on golf courses than in offices, Shaw projected easy power. Behind him came James Davis, smirking as he took his seat. "Alex, good to see you," Shaw said with practiced warmth. "You're looking well after your health scare." "Let's skip the pleasantries, Vincent," Alexander replied coolly. "Why are you here?" Shaw smiled thinly. Direct, as always. He gestured to his assistant, who distributed folders. "I'm here to propose a merger that would benefit both our companies and, more importantly, patients waiting for breakthrough treatments." Rebecca opened the folder to find acquisition terms that would fold Titan into Medicor's larger structure. Alexander would retain a ceremonial role on the board. Most Titan employees would be, quote, "evaluated for retention." The autoimmune division would be integrated into Medicor's existing research structure. "This is an acquisition, not a merger," Rebecca said, looking up from the documents. Shaw's eyes flickered to her with barely concealed annoyance. "And you are?" "Rebecca Chen, Chief Ethics Officer and Director of the Autoimmune Research Division." Yes," Shaw said. "The whistleblower Alex here has taken such a shine to." He turned back to Alexander. "Unusual choice for such critical roles, but I've always admired your unconventional decisions." Alexander's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice even. "Rebecca's credentials are impeccable, as you well know. Now about this proposal. It's quite generous considering Titan's vulnerable position." Shaw interrupted. "Your stock has dropped 17% since we announced Luminax. The board is nervous. Meanwhile, our patent applications cover key compounds your research depends on." "Patent applications based on stolen research," Rebecca pointed out. Davis leaned forward. "Stolen? That's a serious accusation, Ms. Chen. Do you have proof?" "The research timelines alone prove it," Rebecca replied calmly. "Medicor couldn't possibly have developed these compounds independently in the timeframe claimed. Not without our early-stage work that mysteriously disappeared when you joined them." Shaw waved a dismissive hand. "Pharmaceutical research often follows parallel paths. Similar ideas emerge simultaneously. It's why the patent system exists, to establish legal priority." "We both know that's not what happened here," Alexander said. "What I know," Shaw replied, his friendly facade fading, "is that Medicor will have Luminax on market within a year. Titan will be tied up in costly patent litigation that will drain your resources and investor confidence. Your board will eventually force you to accept an acquisition, but on much less favorable terms than I'm offering today." The room fell silent. Rebecca watched Alexander, seeing the weight of the decision in his eyes. Everything he had built was at risk. "I need to discuss this with my team," Alexander finally said. Shaw stood, smiling again. "Of course, you have 48 hours before the offer expires. After that, we proceed with the patent claims and let the chips fall where they may." He paused at the door. "Oh, and Alex, the generous retention package for you personally is contingent on your full support of the acquisition. Just so we're clear." After they left, Rebecca turned to Alexander. "We can't let them win." "They might have already won," he replied grimly. "The patents, can be challenged, Rebecca insisted. We have research logs, early development data. We can prove those compounds originated here. That will take years, Rebecca. Years we don't have. He stood, pacing. Meanwhile, patients with lupus, MS, rheumatoid arthritis, they're still suffering, still waiting for better treatments. If Medicor can bring Luminex to market faster. At what cost? Rebecca asked quietly. You've seen our safety data. The early compounds had significant toxicity issues that we've been carefully addressing. If Medicor rushes to market without solving those problems, people could be harmed. Alexander finished. I know. There has to be another way, Rebecca said, rising to face him. Something we're not seeing. Their eyes met, and in that moment of shared determination, an idea began to form. Later that evening, Rebecca found herself in Alexander's home office, surrounded by research data and legal documents. They had been working for hours, fueled by purpose and strong coffee. Here, Rebecca said, highlighting a section of data. Medicor's published results skip these critical liver enzyme tests entirely. They're not even looking for the toxicity we identified. Alexander nodded, adding the information to their growing file. And their clinical trial design excluded patients with any history of liver issues, the exact population most vulnerable to these side effects. Rebecca sat back, rubbing her tired eyes. They're setting up a potential public health disaster, all to beat us to market. Which makes our next move even more important, Alexander said. They had developed a bold counter-strategy. Rather than fighting Medicor's patents or accepting the acquisition, Titan would publicly release all their research data on these compounds, including the critical safety concerns, into the scientific domain. Once it's public, it can't be patented, Rebecca had pointed out. It becomes prior art that invalidates their applications. And more importantly, the safety issues become public knowledge, Alexander had added. The FDA will have to require additional testing before approving Luminex. It was a radical move that would sacrifice Titan's own commercial interests in these compounds, but it would protect patients and uphold the ethical principles they had committed to. Now, as they finalized the plan, Rebecca studied Alexander across the desk. Lamplight cast his face in warm gold, softening the tension that had been present since Shaw's visit. Despite everything at stake, he looked more certain, more at peace than she had ever seen him. The board will fight this, she said. They'll say we're throwing away valuable intellectual property. Let them, Alexander replied. Some things matter more than patents and profits. Rebecca smiled. The Alexander Morgan I first met would never have said that. The Alexander Morgan you first met was losing his way, he said quietly. It took nearly dying, and meeting someone brave enough to challenge me to remember why I started Titan in the first place. His eyes met hers with an intensity that made her heart skip. Thank you for that. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither was ready to name. Rebecca looked away first, suddenly conscious of how close they were sitting, how late it was, how the professional boundaries between them had blurred over these months of working together. I should go, she said, gathering her notes. Early meeting tomorrow. Alexander nodded, but as she stood to leave, he caught her hand. Rebecca. He hesitated, then simply said, We're doing the right thing. She squeezed his hand briefly before letting go. I know. The next morning, Titan's board convened an emergency session. Alexander laid out the Medicor situation and their proposed response. The reaction was immediate and hostile. This is corporate suicide, one board member shouted. You want to give away research worth millions? Research that Medicor has already stolen and patented, Alexander pointed out. Research that has serious safety concerns that they're ignoring. Then let the FDA process handle that. Another argued, it's not our responsibility to police our competitors. Rebecca stepped forward. Actually, it is our responsibility when we have knowledge that could prevent harm. These aren't abstract concerns. Our data shows a 23% incidence of serious liver enzyme elevation in certain genetic populations. Medicor has deliberately designed their trials to miss this effect. The debate raged for hours. Rebecca watched Alexander field every objection with calm determination, never wavering from the ethical principle at stake. Finally, Diane Mayer, who had supported them in the previous board crisis, spoke up. I've been listening to both sides, she said. And while I share the financial concerns, I believe Alexander and Rebecca are right. Not just ethically, but strategically. She looked around the table. Imagine the public response when Titan releases this data. Explicitly, to protect patient safety. We position ourselves as the company that put people before patents. The goodwill and trust we'll build is worth more long-term than these specific compounds. Her support tipped the balance. By a narrow margin, the board approved the plan with one condition. Alexander and Rebecca would have to personally present their case to the major investors before proceeding. Outside the boardroom, Rebecca let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was close. Too close, Alexander agreed. And the investor meetings will be even tougher. We'll convince them, Rebecca said with more confidence than she felt. Together. The next week became a blur of presentations to increasingly skeptical investor groups. Some saw the strategic vision Diane had outlined. Others threatened to pull their funding entirely. Through it all, Alexander remained steadfast, his quiet conviction gradually winning over even the most profit-focused financiers. It was after one such meeting, walking back to Titan through a rare sunny Seattle afternoon, that Alexander surprised Rebecca by suggesting they take a detour through the nearby park. "We've been locked in conference rooms for days," he said. "I need some air and actual daylight." As they walked beneath flowering cherry trees, their conversation drifted from work to more personal matters. "How's your mother doing with her treatments?" Alexander asked. "Better," Rebecca replied. "The new medication regimen is helping. She's having more good days than bad now." "I'd like to meet her someday," he said. "She raised a remarkable daughter." Rebecca glanced at him, caught off guard by the personal comment. "She'd like you, I think. She always says you can judge someone's character by how they handle being wrong." Alexander laughed. "I failed that test spectacularly when I fired you, but passed it when you rehired me," Rebecca pointed out. "That counts for more." They stopped at a bench overlooking a small pond. Sitting in comfortable silence, Rebecca marveled at how much had changed between them in just a few months. "I've been thinking," Alexander said suddenly, "about what happens after we release the research data." "Medicorp will be furious," Rebecca replied. "They'll probably retaliate somehow." "Undoubtedly, but I'm more concerned about what comes next for our research division." He turned to face her. "We'll need to pivot to new compounds, new approaches. It's an opportunity to truly reimagine drug development from the ground up." The passion in his voice was contagious. "I've had some ideas about that," Rebecca admitted. "Approaches that prioritize quality of life metrics alongside traditional efficacy measures." "Exactly!" Alexander's face lit up. "Treatments that don't just extend life but make it more livable." He hesitated, then added more softly, "The kind of treatments that might have given my sister not just more time, but better days." Rebecca was struck by the vulnerability in his expression. This was so far from the cold executive who had fired her, this man with his guard down, sharing personal pain and professional dreams in equal measure. "We'll build something remarkable," she promised. "Something that honors her memory." His hand found hers on the bench between them, a brief touch of gratitude that sent an unexpected warmth through her. Before either could acknowledge the moment, Alexander's phone rang. Vanessa, with urgent news. Shaw had somehow learned of their plan. Medicorp was threatening immediate legal action if Titan released any research data related to their patent applications. "How did they find out?" Rebecca asked as they hurried back to the office. "We have a leak," Alexander replied grimly. "Someone on the board or in senior management is feeding information to Shaw." The revelation cast a shadow over their progress. With a potential legal battle looming, several board members who had reluctantly supported them began to waver. "We need to move now," Alexander decided, "before we lose more support." That night, working from Alexander's home to avoid corporate espionage, they finalized the research database for public release. Thousands of pages of data, safety concerns, and development notes. Everything Medicorp would need to address the liver toxicity issues before bringing Luminax to market. "Once we release this, there's no going back," Rebecca said, her finger hovering over the submit button that would upload everything to a public scientific repository. Alexander stood behind her, his presence steady and reassuring. "I've never been more certain of anything." Together, they pressed the button. Within hours, the scientific community was abuzz with the unprecedented data release. Medical researchers began analyzing the liver toxicity data. Patient advocacy groups issued statements praising Titan's transparency. Financial analysts scrambled to assess the impact. By morning, the FDA had announced it would require additional safety testing before considering Medicore's application for Luminex, exactly what they had hoped for. But the victory came at a price. Medicore filed multiple lawsuits. Titan's stock dropped sharply. Several major investors publicly questioned Alexander's leadership. As Rebecca and Alexander prepared for a press conference to explain their decision, Vanessa rushed in with breaking news. "Medicore just announced a hostile takeover bid," she said breathlessly. "They're going directly to shareholders with an offer 30% above current market value." Alexander took the news with surprising calm. "They're desperate. This validates everything we've done." "But with the stock price down, shareholders might be tempted," Rebecca worried. "Some will be," he acknowledged. "But not all." He straightened his tie, preparing to face the press. "It's time to remind everyone what Titan stands for." Standing before a room full of journalists, cameras flashing, Alexander spoke with quiet passion about the principles that had guided their decision. Rebecca watched from the side, struck by his transformation from the corporate executive who had once valued profits above all, to this man who was risking everything for what he believed was right. "Pharmaceutical companies have a sacred trust," he told the reporters. "People put their lives in our hands, their hope, their future. That trust must never be compromised for market advantage or financial gain." "What about your fiduciary duty to shareholders?" one reporter challenged. "Our primary duty is to the patients our medicines treat," Alexander replied. "When we honor that commitment, shareholder value follows sustainable value based on trust and legitimate innovation, not shortcuts and patent maneuvers." As questions flew, Rebecca stepped forward to address the technical aspects of the safety concerns. Together they presented a united front of scientific integrity and ethical leadership. After the press conference, as they walked back to Alexander's office, he stopped suddenly. "I need to show you something." He led her to a small conference room where a video call was set up. On the screen was an elderly woman in a wheelchair, surrounded by what appeared to be a support group. "Miss Chen? Mr. Morgan?" the woman said. "I'm Patricia Williams, president of the National Lupus Association. We're holding our monthly meeting and we wanted to thank you personally for what you've done." One by one, people on the screen shared their stories: years of suffering, treatments with devastating side effects, hopes for better options. Their gratitude was palpable, their faces alight with something Rebecca recognized immediately: hope. After the call ended, Rebecca turned to find Alexander with tears in his eyes. "That," he said softly, "is why we founded Titan. Not stock prices, not patents, that." In that moment, something shifted between them. A final wall coming down. Without thinking, Rebecca reached up to brush a tear from his cheek. His hand caught hers, holding it against his face. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes, you could have," Rebecca replied. "You just needed to remember who you really are." The battle for Titan's future was far from over. Medicore's hostile takeover bid loomed. Lawsuits threatened. The road ahead would be difficult and uncertain. But standing there with Alexander, seeing the man he had become, the man he had perhaps always been beneath the corporate armor, Rebecca felt an unshakable certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. Not just as colleagues or allies, but as two people who had discovered something profound in each other: the courage to stand for what matters, no matter the cost. And in that courage, perhaps something even more valuable was growing, something neither had expected to find in the aftermath of illness and injustice, something that made all their professional victories pale in comparison. As Alexander finally released her hand, his eyes still holding hers, Rebecca knew with sudden clarity that their greatest chapter was just beginning. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.